Welcome to the Ladies Who Leverage podcast, where we empower women to own their power, create influence and impact, and live life unapologetically AF. It's time to leverage your expertise, resources, and relationships to build your business, brand, and badassery. So just click subscribe and let's get it. I'm your host, Kelly Charles Collins. Welcome to the Ladies Who Leverage podcast. Today, my special guest is Charlene Wheeless. She is a renowned communications expert, author, and speaker with more than 3 decades of experience in corporate communications. After serving 15 years in CSuite positions, and you know we're going to talk about that because y'all can't see Charlene, but Charlene is a Black woman, and we know Black woman and CSuite not usually synonymous. So after serving 15 years in C-suite positions, her life took an unexpected turn when she was diagnosed with breast cancer. Today, Charlene combines her extensive knowledge of leadership and communications with her skill managing adversity to help others learn to retain authenticity in life and in business and to find strength in vulnerability. So welcome, Charlene. I'm so glad to have you here today.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me, Kelly. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
You're welcome. And so I mentioned about being 15 years in C-suites and how that is not synonymous with being a Black woman. We know that that is a very rare occurrence in this country, unfortunately, right? But it is the reality. So talk to the listeners a little bit about that journey. How did you get to the C-suite? What took you on that path?
Well, being in communications, one of the great things about being in communications is that you always have to work with the leadership of the company, and particularly when you're working crisis, et cetera. So I had some exposure very early on in my career. I don't know that I saw being in the C-suite as being attainable, though, because you look up and nobody looks like you. Right. So I didn't really know that it was attainable, but at the same time, I really pride myself on being a trailblazer and on not asking why, but asking why not. And so once I set my eyes on, hey, I'm going to be an executive, I'm going to be a C-suite executive, I was really almost singularly focused. Obviously you have to do a good job and those things. But I really knew that I wanted to rise to be an executive, and I felt like I deserved that. What I didn't realize, though, is that it wasn't just about hard work, and it wasn't necessarily up to me. Right.
Right. And, I want to ask you about that. When you say it wasn't necessarily about hard work and up to you, there's so many things that we want to do in life and we aspire to be, but we don't have the final decision. So when we're talking about the C-suite, what was that for you when you say that it wasn't necessarily up to you?
Well, I think, it's the same that we all face, which is, do you fit into the boys club or don't you? Right. And of course, if you're asking the question, then you don't fit into the boys club. And so, it's there comes a point where it's not about how hard you work. It's not necessarily even about how good you are at your job. It becomes whether or not I put they in air quotes, see you as one of them, right? Because I think we're still in an age, and certainly as I was coming up, where, they wanted a homogeneous, leadership team. And I used to say I got lucky, but I don't say that anymore because it's not about luck, right? We get what we deserve and what we earn. I had a couple of champions who really stepped out for me. And I purposely use the term champion and not mentor, right? Because mentors are great because mentors help you get accustomed to your surroundings in a company or a new environment. Champions are the ones who get you promoted because they're your advocates and they're the ones who are talking about you when you're not in the room, right? So you can't get there without champions. And I was, I earned the respect of several champions along the way. And in my first VP job, I was 35 years old, and my champion was the CEO of the company. And, it goes from there. Sometimes you just need to get that one foot in the door, and then you can leap and leap and leap. But one thing I always did is I was never afraid to volunteer for something I didn't know how to do.
Right? That's awesome. Yeah, that's really we'll talk about that in 1 second. I want to go back to what you were saying about the mentors and the champions. So I usually say mentors and sponsors, but thinking in the same way that you do, in that I usually tell people, for me, a mentor shows you the way, a sponsor makes the way. So kind of what you were saying about a champion, they will speak your name in the rooms that you're not in.
Absolutely.
Right? They know when the position is coming up, or when there's nobody even knows that there's going to be this position, right? And they can, if they speak your name in some of those spaces, that is how you get there. But like you said, you had to do the work to earn somebody's thought that they would put their name and their reputation
absolutely
on the line for you.
Yeah. And I tell people that all the time, that, they say, well, where can I find a champion, or how do I find a champion? And, and we'll talk about that a bit, but I also want to remind people that, champions aren't just going to be your champion because you want them to, because they are putting their reputation on the line for you. And so champions aren't going to do that for someone that they don't think, can make everybody look good. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Because it's their reputation is their currency as well.
Yeah. And I think some people don't understand that. People get upset when they say, well, why didn't you put my name in for that? Or, why didn't you speak up for me? You have to earn that, because when someone speaks up for you, when someone gives your name or lends your name or refers you, it's like you said, their currency of their reputation that's going with them. The person that they're speaking to doesn't know you. So if you come in and don't live up to that, right, to the hype of whatever your champion or sponsor says, that person is not going to be upset with you. They're going to be upset with me, right? The sponsor or their champion who has put their name on the line.
Yeah. And, I look at it the same way as I do, when people ask me to be a reference for them for a job, I take that responsibility very seriously. And if I don't think that you can represent you and me well, then I'm not going to serve as a reference, because again, just like for everybody, your reputation, your credibility is your currency. Yeah. And so you have to use that wisely.
Yeah, I think that's such an important lesson. And I think it's something that people really don't think about. And they, something like a reference, right? We think, oh, it's just a reference. But it is so much more than that when you're talking about your own credibility, your own integrity, right? And your reputation as it goes forward. Mm-hmm. And Charlene, I want to ask you, because we
Sure.
talked about being a VP at 35.
Mm-hmm.
How long, like when you started your career, what was the trajectory to get you to the C-suite? What were the types of positions that you held?
So I think a couple of things. One was I was not afraid to move companies and to move around, right? There are a lot of people say, I'm going to set my feet down at this one company, and in 20 years, they're going to recognize my value, right? Well, I'm just not that patient. And so in this job that I was in, I was a manager of communications. I would really try to get involved in as much as I could, even if I didn't know how to do it, right? But I had enough either confidence or ignorance to think I could just figure it out. So this company, I got to know the CEO, and I got to know some of the other executives, and, a new initiative would come up and I'd say, hey, I'll volunteer for that. I'd love to learn a little bit more about that. Anything that could help me be seen as more than only a communicator within the role. And, recognizing what companies value, right? I tell people that no matter what your chosen profession discipline is, when you go into a company, you need to know how the company makes money and how they lose money, right? Because operations are everything. And actually the company that I became a VP at, interesting story. So I was a manager of communications and I left the company. And a year later, the CEO called and asked me to come back and asked me to come back at a director level, which was fine. When they asked me to come back, they said, here's your salary. And in 6 months, if you perform the way we think you will, we're going to increase your salary to this, right? A little bit more. And
Yeah.
I said, thank you, but no, thank you. And they were like, wait a minute, what are you talking about? I said, if you think I'm worth that much in 6 months, then I'm worth that much now.
Yes.
And they said, well, is that a deal killer? I said, yes, it's a deal killer. And so they came around. I think that in doing that, I gained a respect that I didn't have before, because I wasn't willing to just say, oh, aren't I lucky? I'm so glad that you've plucked me out of obscurity. So I went back to the company, and then within a couple of years, I was promoted to vice president. But here's another interesting lesson. I was speaking with the chairman one day, and I said to him, I said, I've been performing at this level since I came back. Why did it take so long for me to be promoted to a vice president and a corporate officer, of this multi-billion-dollar company? And he said, Charlene, you never told anybody you wanted to be a vice president.
Mm.
And I thought, isn't that interesting? It was a male-dominated company, very traditional, the company, very traditional leadership. I had 2 small children and a successful husband at the time. So the assumption was that I was more on the mommy track than the executive track. And so one of the chapters of my book is called Ask for What You Want, right? If you want something, you need to tell people that you want it, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, again, you've left it up to someone else to decide your future.
Yeah.
So the path was very, I didn't sit down and say, this is where I want to be in 5 years, but I looked for openings for opportunity. I recognized when people didn't think I could do something, or when people would just dismiss me, just not even consider me for something. And so then I'd find another route. Right?
Yeah.
So it's so I wouldn't take no for an answer. And I wouldn't let what someone else thought I could or couldn't do dictate what I could or couldn't do.
Yes. I told you when I read about you, I was like, yes, I have got to speak to Charlene because she speaks my language. So the name of the podcast is Ladies Who Leverage, and it's also the name of my global women's community. Right. And what you just said about asking for what you need and what you want is exactly why I started that community, because I wanted women to start knowing that that was something that we have the right to do.
Absolutely.
Right? Absolutely. Because so often we think we just need to sit back and be polite and wait for the things to come to us, and everybody will, find out that that's what you want to do at some point. And it's like, no, ask, right? We are brilliant human beings who have so much to offer, and we really do need to start to ask. And that goes back to what you said about, the salary. When you came in and you were like, I'm not going to take that. If you think that of me, then do it now. Right. And that's so important, because like you said, it did then give you a level of respect, because they were like, okay, this is not somebody who's going to just take anything. And it's not just about you taking anything, because for business people, especially businessmen, right, what they think of is, okay, well, then when it comes to our money and our things and our deals, she's not just going to lay down. So for them, it goes even further than just you asking for your salary. It is a reflection for them of how you may operate in their business. Right. How much gravitas do you have? Right. Yeah. That becomes really important. Yeah. So and then you mentioned your book, and we're going to talk about your breast cancer journey, because as I mentioned to you, my mom is a survivor. And so that is always so important to me. And I love that, women are just fighting for their lives when it comes to breast cancer. But before we get to that, Let's go back a little bit and talk about your book. So your new book is You Are Enough, Black C-suite executive and DEI expert on finding authenticity and diversity. You break down in that book what it means to understand yourself completely, both the good and the bad, in order to find the courage to take action against the things that are negatively impacting your life. Tell me about the book and why did you write it?
Okay, so the formal title of the book is You Are Enough, Reclaiming Your Career and Your Life with Purpose, Passion, and Unapologetic Authenticity.
Sorry, I messed that up.
No, that's okay. No. It's just that it kind of brings it all together. So, I didn't know I was going to write a book. I had, as you mentioned, I had breast cancer. When I came out of my treatment for breast cancer, which was 7 months was the plan, was the treatment plan. It ended up stretching 3.5 years because of complications. But after my first, the first 7 months, and I was ready to go back to work, I had this epiphany. One was that I was not the same person anymore. And I didn't know that that was going to happen. I also didn't realize that, when you have a disease or breast cancer, everybody is rallying around you to fight for your life, but nobody tells you that when you look up, you might not be in a life that you want to be in, right? And so, so I really struggled. When I came out of treatment, I was depressed. And, quite frankly, I wanted to die, just not from breast cancer. And because I was just so lost, and I was looking for different resources and other people who would talk about this, and I couldn't find anything. And so I was really worried, because when you come out of a disease and people say, "How are you?" No one gives you the room to not be ecstatic, because you just beat breast cancer. So you say, "I'm great, I just beat breast cancer," and inside you're falling apart. And so I realized in going back to work in this very, powerful, demanding position, that I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't play the game, because I had been through something, life-threatening and life-affirming. So, and also I started having a lot of complications. So I left my corporate job, and I thought I was just going to take a break. And then I woke up one day, Kelly, and I said, "Oh my gosh, I've been wondering why I have cancer and how I am supposed to turn this into something positive." And I thought, I'm going to write a book. I'm going to tell my story, and I'm going to tell it so authentically, warts and all, so that maybe people can learn from my lessons and my strategies, and their journey will be shorter or less lonely. And it was really interesting, because I wasn't thinking that I had a story to tell. And I happen to be a Christian, so I very much believe that you take something bad and turn it into something good. And when I woke up that day, my purpose was so clear. It was remarkable to me. And it's like, I have a lot to say. I had a voice when I was in corporate, but I really have a voice now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Isn't it wonderful though, when your purpose becomes so clear to you, because everything else just will come into line,
it just
right?
unfolds, right?
Yes.
It unfolds before you. And it's, I had no idea, obviously none of us did, of what the last 1.5 years was going to be. And because my book is also about, it's about knowing and owning your value. It's about overcoming adversity. It's about resilience. I had no way of knowing how timely it would be. And it's been, I didn't aspire to be an author, but it has been amazing, the people who have, hit me up on LinkedIn that I don't even know, with comments about my book. And it's just, it's how you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. When I thought about the podcast and telling the stories of women, I wanted it to be that we could share the good, the bad, the ugly, because so many times we believe that we're alone, that we're the only ones, right, that are going through this. And, especially with your career and your ascension into the C-suite, I can only imagine some of the stories, 'cause I used to be an employment lawyer before I retired. So I can only imagine, some of those stories. And I think that's important for people to understand too, right? Not just women, not just Black women, but people who are not Black or not people of color, to understand what happens in workplaces. What we're saying to, what we're feeling is not something that we made up over here. Right. And the toll that it takes on the body. Because I was listening to an interview that you did, and you were talking about stress. Yes. And the role that you thought that may have played in your breast cancer journey. So I want you to talk about that, because I think people don't understand that either. Like, I think that's how my mom ended up with breast cancer, right? Was the stress that she was under, because she had never been sick or anything like that. And I truly believe that stress plays a role. And I know that you mentioned that. So, talk to us about that.
Yeah. So my mother, she died in her 50s, having her second heart transplant, and she died on the table. She worked incredibly hard. She was an amazing woman, and she was under a tremendous amount of stress. And there was no doubt in my mind that the amount of stress she was under contributed to her heart condition that she had. And when I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and it's a process, right? You have lots of appointments, et cetera. And every time I was in the doctor's office to see my breast surgeon when I was first diagnosed, I was always on my phone, right? Texting away, answering email, doing this, doing that. She's in one of my appointments, she sat me down and she said, Charlene, you need to take the 7 months off for your treatment. You cannot work during your treatment. And I said, are you crazy? And she said, I'm telling you now, the amount of stress that you're under, you will not get better if you work during your treatment. You will not. And so I thought about that, and, I knew I was tired, I was just tired. And my company, we had a generous program where I could take that 7 months off. And then when I went back to work and tried to pick up on all that stress all over again, that's when all my complications started. And at one point I was on this is going to sound so crazy, Kelly. I was on a business trip and running around doing what we do when we're on business trip. I get up one morning for a breakfast meeting. I'm stressed out. I noticed that I had already had reconstruction at this point, and I noticed that the breast that had cancer was swelling. No, the breast wasn't there anymore, but the reconstruction, very long story short, it burst open. Okay, in the emergency room, it burst open, right? And that was my other wake-up call, right? And the doctor told me if that had happened in my hotel room rather than in the hospital, I would have bled to death.
Wow.
Right? And I thought again about the stress factor, right? And it's, did stress make my breast blow up? No. But does stress contribute to weakening my immune system, to breaking down my body? Absolutely. And we women are horrible at taking care of ourselves, right? And that was another reason why I wrote the book. And early on in the book, I say something to the effect of, part of the reason why I'm doing this is because I want you to avoid your premature death, right? Because it is that serious.
Yeah. Yeah, that's deep for you, to say that, but it's so true. And our body has a way of sitting us down, right? If Absolutely. You don't want to sit down, it'll give us clues. And if you don't want to sit down, it will sit you down. Absolutely. If you don't mind sharing, Charlene, how old were you when you were diagnosed, and how did that feel? Like, what did that do to you?
Oh my gosh. So I was 53 when I was first diagnosed. And it was an accidental diagnosis. So what I mean by that is I'd had a mammogram, and you get the information back that, oh, we need to check and do biopsies of this and that. And for my insurance, I needed to go to to a breast surgeon to get the authorization for the biopsy. She did a breast exam while we were there, and she said, I feel a knot, but it's not on your mammogram. And I said, I don't know what to tell you. And so it was the size of a pea. And she said, I'm just going to biopsy this one in my office. And so she did. That was on Friday. On Monday afternoon, she called me. I was in a meeting and I had my phone, which I normally wouldn't have done, but I knew I was expecting, that she may call. And so she called and she said, Charlene, it was the P. You have breast cancer. And I said, okay, that's it. I just said, okay. And then I told her that I'd be in touch because I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know how to have breast cancer, right? And so I felt kind of I'm standing in the hallway. I felt kind of tears coming up behind in the back of my eyes. And I just went to my office. I grabbed my things. I got in my car and I called her back and I was like, what does all this mean? What's going to happen? And, you go through a battery of tests and we found out that it had spread into my lymph nodes. And so it was faster growing than we thought. And yeah, when someone tells you you have cancer, you don't really hear anything else. You're just kind of wondering. And of course we immediately go to our death immediately. Right. And I have 2 daughters that I want to be around for. And it was just, it was just an amazing experience. And I promised myself that I would never ask God why, why me, because why not me? But I wanted to know why me, because I knew that there had to be a reason. But it was, and when I went through chemo and my hair started falling out, my husband shaved my head. People think going bald is about, when you have cancer, is about
Vanity.
Vanity. It's so not. I would look in the mirror and I would stop and stare because I didn't know who this person was that was looking back at me. I had no idea who she was.
Yeah.
And I thought, am I ever going to be me again? And the answer is no.
Right.
You're going to be a new you.
You're different. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's so funny as you tell that story. I feel myself in that story, but being the daughter of someone who is diagnosed, right? Mm-hmm. And, when you said, when you were going bald and you would look at that person and say, I don't know who that is. That's the feeling that I had about my mom. That when I would look at my mom, I was like, I don't know who this person is. To the point, Charlene, that when she was going through chemo and radiation and I would go visit her, I would stand in the parking lot because in the driveway, I would not go in the house because I just didn't know who this person was. Like it just changed, right? Who you saw. And so as you tell the story, I interviewed her. There's on the podcast, I interviewed my mom about her breast cancer journey.
I'll have to go back and listen to that one.
Yeah. And, it reminds me so much of what you're saying and the whole thing about, you don't know what to say. Like, you don't know how to have cancer. Right. And you'll hear, so my mom's sister, because she's a nurse and she understood that, she wrote this book called The Little Pink Purse of Courage. And it's all of these questions to ask the doctor when you're diagnosed, because people don't know how to have breast cancer and they don't know how to ask the questions. And for you, you said, I worked for a company that I had the opportunity to go take care of myself. What would you say to women who are in a space where they don't have that luxury to go take that time off and they're thinking, what do I do?
So I have this, I have two sayings that well, three, but I'll just share these first two that I rely on all the time. One is it's choice, not chance, that changes your life, right? And the other is 7 seconds of courage,
Mm.
right? I believe that you can change your life. You can make a decision to change your life with just 7 seconds of courage and one deep breath.
Yeah.
But, so for women, I have all these sayings. And so what comes to mind right now, Kelly, is, a dead battery can't jump a dead battery, right? So if I understand, if you can't do it financially, if you have kinds of barriers in your way, and I would encourage all women to leave no stone unturned as far as finding resources to help you so that you can lighten your load, and potentially even, leave work, right? Make sure you sign up for short-term disability, right? And never skip that so that, so you can have that extra $50 or whatever it is. And, there are a lot of organizations out there that do help women with their treatment, with their medication, with their just keeping their life going. But make no mistake, the goal is to keep your life going. And I've had friends and seen people who worked through their treatment, and it doesn't really turn out so well a lot of the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
My mom was lucky that she worked through it every day. I think she may have missed like one day with radiation, but I think for her, it was that continuing the routine of doing that allowed her to be doing something other than thinking about the
right.
cancer. But but some people just can't, right? And it was like the position that you were in where your doctor was like, no, you will not get better, right? And the goal is to live.
Right.
And so, we have to figure that out, and organizations and have to be mindful of those things and really understand that, these are people's lives, right?
Right, absolutely. And and if you have to work through it, just try to lighten your load, rely on your coworkers or the team, um, because your attention should just be on you and what's the right thing for you, not on proving that you can still be you while you're fighting cancer.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. There are no there are no awards for that.
No.
Right. Right. It's about saving your life.
Yeah. And you said that after your treatment, then you went back and you realized, no, this is not working. So did you then make a decision, Charlene, to leave corporate America, or did it take some time for you to transition out of there?
Oh, it took some time because I fought it, right? I was like, wait, I'm a type A personality. I get done what 2.5 people normally do in one day, right? I can get this done. I'm going to be back to me. I'm going to be back to who I was. And I remember distinctly, Kelly, standing in my office, and a woman who was on my team came in, and she's like, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Look at all this stuff on my desk. Who does all this work?" And she says, "You do. You've always worked like this." And I was like, this is insane. This is flat out insanity. But then I was like, well, if that's what I used to do, I'd better do that again. And what I saw happening was, on the outside, everybody was treating me just the way they did before and piling on the work because they know Charlene's going to do it and she's a perfectionist and all this. And inside, I was working my way into a nervous breakdown. And I came home one day, and I walked in the house and I talked to my husband, and I just said, honey, I can't do it. I think I am falling apart. And I had to make a choice. And I had to choose me, but I wanted so badly to be who I was, because I didn't know who I was going to be, right? If I wasn't her, who was I going to be? But I just had to find my own 7 seconds of courage, and walk away from a life I'd spent 30 years building.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
Talk a little bit more about the 7 seconds of courage. Where does that come from? And how can women use that? We talk about leverage, and I mean, your whole story is about leveraging. How can women use that to leverage? I always say leverage every damn thing. So just
Right.
leverage, right? How can they use that?
Yeah, so I think that what holds a lot of people back, especially women and Black women, what holds us back is fear, right? And I hate fear. So, but that's what holds us back. And so I often ask people, what would you do if you weren't afraid? What would you do? And that's when I say, take 7 seconds, take a deep breath, count to 7, exhale, and just do it. Whatever it is you need to do. If it is to tell your boss you're done, if it's to tell your spouse you're leaving, if it's to ask somebody to marry you, whatever it is, and I tap into my 7 seconds all the time. And when I wrote the book, and there's a portion when you write the book, you're getting testimonials, right? And you want good testimonials, and but you're sending people your book and you don't know if you'll get it. And
Yeah.
I wanted the CEO of Fortune to read my book. And I thought, Alan Murray is going to blow me off so fast. And it was late at night. And I said, you know what? I'm going to tap into my 7 seconds of courage. I'm going to type this email, ask the question, and hit send. And that's exactly what I did. Is I typed out the email, I took a deep breath, I counted to 7, I exhaled, I hit send. He emailed me back 10 minutes later, said, I would be happy to read your book. And then he sent me a testimonial, and I told everybody, you don't have, if you don't like the book, that's fine. I don't want you to just, glad hand it, right? He sent back just such a powerful testimonial. And he looked at my book in a way that I hadn't, because I was talking to women and marginalized groups. And when he read the book, he said, CCOs and leaders need to read this book because they need to know what's going on with their employees and what's really happening, but that was my 7 seconds of courage, and it delivered for me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not always going to work out that way, but if you don't try,
Never know.
you never know.
Yeah.
Right?
And it's so funny because so many people probably sit and said, like, I'm not going to send it to him. And so you sent it and he's like, oh, somebody actually,
Right. Exactly. Right. There are probably a lot of people who talk themselves out of it. I'm thinking he has 100 books to read,
Right.
and there are probably 90 people who aren't sending those emails.
That's right. Absolutely. One of the things that I heard you talk about too, before we wrap up, you were talking about a story, and you were saying, wear your high heels and your blue nail polish.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. And it made me smile because when I started out as a public defender, practicing law, I would wear orange suits and red suits and, whatever. I was not wearing a navy blue suit. I was not going to wear a black suit. I just didn't, if it was black, it had something else on it, right? It had some fancy thing. And so when you were telling that story about the high heels and blue nail polish, I was like, yes. So I would love for you to share with our listeners what you mean by that, like put on your high heels and your blue nail polish.
That's where I talk about being unapologetically you, right? I don't have a lot of regrets in my life because I try not to live my life that way. But when I look back and think about how I hid who I was and how I turned myself inside out, upside down, and every which way to be who people felt I needed to be, that really saddens me, because I believe so strongly that you can be successful being unapologetically you, right? And so if unapologetically you is bright orange and pink and purple and other colors, then you go for it. If it's blue nail polish, you go for it, right? Because you have to be you. And now what I tell people on the flip side of that is that when you're living, unapologetically authentic, you have to realize that you've made a choice and some people are not going to like that, right? And there may be repercussions because you have chosen not to fit in, right? But it's okay because it was your choice, right? It wasn't something that was thrust upon you. So
Yeah.
I just, I've been in those companies where everybody's wearing blue and black and brown. And, I remember when
Right.
I had a supervisor who told me that, that I wore, bright colors and that they were more of a kind of a khakis and polo kind of company, and I thought to myself, and then I said to him, it's not my fault that you guys are bad dressers, right? Why does that have to come back on me? And I said, and yes, I stand out. I'm a Black woman amongst thousands of white men. It's not the suit that's standing out.
Right. No.
But I just think you have to be unapologetically you.
Yeah.
You have to be true to yourself.
Yeah.
And understand the systems that you're in. I mean, was I going to come to work with 12-inch nails? No, right? But I wasn't going to let someone's idea of what was professional dictate whether or not I was going to wear blue or black nail polish.
Yeah. Yeah.
That wasn't an expression of me.
Yeah. And anyone who's listening to this episode and they know me, they'll know why I wanted to speak to you, because when you talk about unapologetically, I'm always talking about that my new book that's coming out is Unapologetic AF, 34 ways to unleash your inner badass. So,
oh my gosh, you have to tell me when it comes out, because I want to put it on my social channels.
Yeah.
That is great.
And our tagline for Ladies Who Leverage is to live life unapologetically AF.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's so important for us to show up as who we want to be, right? Who we are, not what other people, right? Not who other people think that we should be, because then we're living their life, not ours.
Exactly. And that's why I say you are enough.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
It's if there's any message that I want to impart to people, especially women, especially Black women, 80% of women walk around with imposter syndrome, right? The fear of being found out. And so they're always improving mode, right? So one, stop trying to get everybody to like you when you don't even like everybody, right? And two, you are enough.
Yeah.
You can be unapologetically you, and it's okay.
It is okay. Charlene, I want to know, because you talked about going back to, being the person before breast cancer, but I want our listeners to know, who is Charlene now? What are you doing in the world? How are you living in your purpose?
Well, there are a couple of ways. One, of course, with the book, and the book, and Kelly, I bet you feel the same way about your upcoming book, it's about the message, right? It's about sharing that message as broadly as I possibly can. I believe that's my purpose. Because I talk about my career path, my career journey and life journey, and also cancer, I have a number of people who I don't know or have never met that I text with about it, because they've been diagnosed with cancer. And so I become kind of their cancer coach, right? And it's almost always completely by text. Although a couple of weeks ago, I went with someone to pick out her wig because she had no idea of what that meant and how to do that. And I was alone when I did mine, and so I help her. So part of the way I live my purpose is by being there for other cancer patients and saying, hey, did you think about doing this? Or helping them get over the god awful, I don't want to get a second opinion because I don't want to hurt my doctor's feelings, right? No, right? I have a hard no on that one. So that's one. The other is, is I've chosen not to go back into a corporate job, but instead to start a public speaking career, because I think I have a message for everybody. And that's really where I focus. I do a little bit of executive coaching, but that's not a big part of my business. It's I'm quite selective about that, but really it's the public speaking just to share that message, right? And the book is companion to that, but it's I just feel so passionate about people knowing, women knowing that they are enough and believing it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I know I get carried away, Kelly. I'm sorry.
I I love it. As I'm sitting here, I'm like, she needs to meet my mom, because my mom does the same thing that you do, that
Mhm.
she has really taken on this mantle of being like a cancer buddy. Right. And that if somebody, she will text or she will, get on the phone with them and she'll share her story. And I
Mhm.
think that has really helped her. She's in her 20th year of
Wow.
survivorship. And
That's
so I think that has really helped her,
Mhm.
right, to just continue to live, to be of service to other people. So I'm so thankful, as the child of a survivor. I'm so thankful for you and other women like you and my mom who have really taken on this mantle of being your sister's keeper.
Right.
And just
Absolutely.
and absolutely sharing that journey with them, but also sharing your journey with us, so that we understand and that we can continue to support you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah,
I can talk to you forever.
yeah, I know. I feel so called to this, which is, I know people sometimes say that that's strange, but I have a lot of courage, I think, because of what I've been through in my life. So I'm willing to say what needs to be said. And and if I have enough courage to do it, then I need to do that, because some people don't.
Yeah.
Right. And so sometimes you just need to be a voice for someone else. And I remember both with cancer and when I was younger in my career, and I go to these panel discussions to hear women and how they're climbing the corporate ladder, right? And and they'd say things like, "Oh, it wasn't so bad. I didn't feel left out or this or that, and I made a commitment to myself when I was in my 20s. I said, if I'm ever in a spot like that, I'm going to tell the truth, right? I'm going to talk about the negative feedback you get. That's about you, right? And I brought that same view to cancer. If I saw one more person in an ad in a turban smiling like they're on top of the world, my head was going to explode. I was like, somebody needs to tell the truth. I'm missing body parts, for God's sakes. Right?
Yeah.
It's like everybody's going through something, and I think Robin Roberts, the anchor, she always says, make your mess your message. This is my mess, therefore I made it my message.
Yeah, I love it. And it's an awesome message. And I'm so glad that you have taken this on and that you're really stepping into your purpose. So how can everyone find the book? And if they want you to come and speak, how do they find you?
So the book is available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and also in some independent bookstores, but that varies. My website is charlenewheeless.biz, B-I-Z. So you can find me there, and there's a space where you can send me a message to book me for speaking events. I do keynotes, as well as I have also been doing discussions, primarily virtually, but discussions around my book, hour-long discussions. I don't charge for my time with that. I just ask that you buy the book.
Yeah.
So those are two places. And then, of course, I'm active on social media, especially LinkedIn and Instagram.
Awesome. And say the name of your book again, Charlene.
Sure. It's called You Are Enough, Reclaiming Your Career and Your Life with Purpose, Passion, and Unapologetic Authenticity. So if you go look for it on Amazon, I'm on the cover sitting down in my backyard with a very cool orange hat on.
Yes, unapologetically doing all of that.
Yeah.
Well, I hope that this is not our last conversation. I really enjoyed this discussion with you. And, as I said, at the first time I read about you, I was like, I have to speak to you because it just seemed like our paths were just in alignment. So again, thank you so much for being here. Everyone, please go get Charlene's book. Please follow her on all of her social media. And especially for us, please follow us on social media, Ladies Who Leverage. and subscribe to the Ladies Who Leverage podcast. Drop us a review and share it with all of your friends. We look forward to keeping entertaining you, educating you, empowering you, especially the women. We really want to empower you to live life unapologetically AF. And if you are a female entrepreneur, a side hustler, or thinking about becoming an entrepreneur, and you are looking for a community of badass women who are going to support you, correct you, and hold you accountable, then I would invite you to join Ladies Who Leverage. You can go to team, TEAM, as in Mary, LWL.com. That's team, LWL.com, and join us in our Facebook community. Thank you all so much for tuning in today. Remember, all of our episodes drop on Monday mornings at 9 a.m. Eastern. So we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us. This podcast is brought to you by Lady Lawyer Media. If you're a badass woman who's ready to take action to live life unapologetically AF, then you need to join our global community on Facebook, Ladies Who Leverage. And remember to subscribe to our podcast. And until next time, let's collabosource, strategize, and monetize.